Good evening, students. How are you? Hope you're doing good at this times. Sorry for being late, but a lot of work. And this is based on uh, the average of IG. They wanted the inheritance and the human reproduction part, but before we go into human reproduction part, there's an important part here. Of course, these notes are by Save My Exams, as you can see. So I signed and I paid as a teacher. It's supposed to be that I'm allowed to share them, but I don't fully know. So I cannot, unfortunately, share these PDFs for legal reasons. For that, we will start with the human reproduction. Now, before we start with the human reproduction, there is an important part which is the sexual reproduction. Of course, humans they reproduce by sexual reproduction, and that is let's sort it out with the read a few points here. I added a page so we can sort it out with the read a few points. The human reproduction goes with the sexual reproduction. Okay, now the sexual reproduction is you must know that in like advanced species there are males and females in advanced species, and they contain special cells. They're not like other cells. We call them reproductive cells, or the other name that we're going to use a lot, we call them gametes. Okay, pardon my, let's say, the handwriting. Let me convert this. Gametes. Gametes are the cells, let's say, let me do this, okay? We call them sexual cells. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, these cells are ready to fuse with each other. Okay, so let me give you an example for that. Okay, so let's say this is a normal human cell with a normal nucleus. Let's say this is a mitochondria, whatever. And the normal human cells would be like, let's say, with full chromosome number. Okay, they have full chromosome number. Let's refer that to with 2n. Okay, full chromosomal number. Okay, these are, let's say, body cells. Now the gametes, on the other hand, the gametes will be different. The gametes would be that they have this, let's say, nucleus. This is the mitochondria, and they would have half the number of the chromosomes, and we refer to that by an N. Okay, we call this gamete. Okay, so I'm just starting with this, so it will be obvious for everyone. We call this cell gamete. So, for example, if humans, okay, let's say a fruit fly got cells with 4 chromosomes. Okay, that's the normal. Okay, that's the normal cell, normal body cell. So the gamete of these cells would be what? 2. Okay, that would be a gamete. For human part, we have 46 chromosomes for humans. 46 chromosomes. And that's the normal. And in our gametes, can you guess how much we would have? Yes, we would have half this number, which is going to be 23 as gametes. Now, these gametes will be a male gamete and will be a female gamete. And of course, you already studying this, you already know that the male gamete, which is the sperm cell, is different from the oval cell. And we must know each one and their function. And we're going to take that in a few bit. But first, let's talk about the process of the reproduction itself. Okay, so the idea of let's say sexual reproduction is we have from the male, okay, and we have the female. And let's say this is the normal oval cell. This is a normal oval cell, and this one contains 23. Okay, and this is the male cell. So I'm gonna draw like this. Okay, and this one contains also a 23, okay, which is going to be half the number of chromosomes. Now these are male gametes and female gametes because they have half the number, which is going to be referred to be what? An N, and this is going to be an N. Now, in the reproduction process, what actually happen is this nucleus will fuse with this nucleus. Okay, can you guess what happens? 23 chromosomes will fuse with another 23 chromosomes to produce a special cell with the full number, which is going to be 46, but this one is fused, okay? And the fused cell, we call it, we have a name for that. It's always called a zygote. It's always, whether it's in plants or animals, is the same. It's called zygote. Okay, so this is the what do we call this process when the nucleus of the male fuse with the nucleus of the female? It's called fertilization. Okay, we call this fertilization process, and this process will lead to forming a new species with the new characteristics. Because if we ended up like copying from one another. Let's say only the males can reproduce and they reproduce asexually. Only males will produce males and females will produce females, and they will be identical copies. Okay, so let's say imagine Stephen. Okay, for example, here, of course, these are just hypothetical examples. Sorry, Stephen, if you're the one watching. Stephen decided to reproduce asexually, he will produce another Stephen, and that would be a problem because there will be no difference and no variations, and that will lead for, let's say, lack of adaptation, lack of variety. So let's say Stephen is weak against high temperatures, and now we're facing global warming. Okay, and Stephen reproduce only asexually, so he will produce more Stevens. With that, there's no variation in that. So when the heat gets up, Stephen will die because there's no variation in that. Okay, that why is it important? Because these are some questions in IGCSE that they will ask you this, why this is important, or let's say you must understand the full theory of why the sexual reproduction is important for all human organisms, or the importance. It's important for the species survival and to ensure adaptation and variation in the process. Okay, so jumping ahead from that, let's jump into the human reproduction part. Now, human reproduction part really it's really easy. Now you need first to introduce yourself to the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part. I don't like to explain on these writings. I would like to explain on, let's say, the photos itself, of course. Now this, as you can see, this is the male reproductive part for all the males. Of course, you know them. And as you can see, it consists from multiple parts, and these parts do a certain job, and every job is important. And what we're going to focus on, which is the important parts here, is the testes. As you can see, this is from the lobe here, and we have the seminiferous tubules, or we call them here the sperm duct, and we have also the foreskin and the scrotum. Of course, the scrotum is just the skin out layer that covers the testes, and the testes are the most important part because they're responsible not only for producing sperms, they also responsible for producing the male hormone, and we're going to take that in a bit. Okay, so let's take one at a time with their function. And as you can see, prostate gland. Okay, the prostate gland, of course, it's found actually not here. It's found below. Okay, these are like the glands found below, and these are not the same glands as referred here. By the way, the prostate gland is not the same here as these glands. So pay attention to that. They're actually found in an area here. Let me just like point that out with a pointer. Okay, so they found in an area here, and it will be tested here. Okay. Now let's talk about the prostate gland. Produces fluid called semen that provide sperm cells with the nutrients. We have sperm ducts. Of course, uh, the sperms need a passage so they can pass through the sperm duct. Urethra. It's now the point. The urethra is the point when, let's say, either the urine or the sperms can get out from the penis. And also we have the testes. These are, now they have a special name. We call them germinative cells. Okay. Of course, they are contained with a bag of skin. They produce the sperms and also the testosterone hormone. Now we have the scrotum, which is the skin that covers the testes, and we have the penis, which is the passes the urine out, and it's also allows the human reproduction process. This is the main parts of the male hormones, and we're gonna focus on let's say testes here, the glands, and the prostate gland, and the other stuff. The female one is a bit easier to understand. As you can see, just like the male, the female also have same thing. They have the ovaries, which is the site of producing the ova or the egg. By the way, ova in Greek, ova, egg are the same. Okay, so just in case you're missing this out, because in biology we use either Latin or Greek words. Okay. So, of course, we have the ovaries that are responsible for many things. One of them is producing the ova, also producing the hormones of the females, which is going to be the estrogen and progesterone, and we're going to talk about them later on in the menstruation cycle. Really important hormones. Okay. Now, of course, the video will be like long, so if you feel tired you can like take a break for 5 minutes and come back. Now let's go back. Of course, just like the sperm duct, like the egg needs a place to pass through, and that will be the job of the oviduct. It connects the ovary here, connects the ovary with the uterus. The uterus is the place where the baby gonna be growing, and the ovary contains the ova, which is gonna be the female gamete, and it will mature and develop when the hormone is released. We have the uterus. The uterus is a muscular bag filled with soft lining. It will be the place for fertilized egg after fertilization. Now we're going to talk about the fertilization process after we study the gametes. We have also the cervix, ring of muscles, like a place for entry for the sperms. Of the vagina, also the muscular tube, and let's say is going to be the place where the sexual reproduction process is going to be happening. Okay, the sexual intercourse. Now let's talk about the gametes and fertilization process. Okay, now the gametes of humans are simple. We have only two types of gametes. The male gamete, which is going to be the sperm cell, and the female gamete is going to be the egg or the ova. Now, really easy to understand. These cells are adapted to their job. Okay, so these cells are adapted to their job. So look like this. Okay, so the egg would start here. Okay, and in the ovulation process, it will be here. This is in the ovulation process. I will make it for another color so you can understand. Now, in the ovulation process, as you can see, the sperm need to travel from this area and upwards here so the fertilization can be happening. And this process needs movement. Okay, so the sperm cell must be able to move. Either from that, it will be useless. So I would expect to see a movement organelle in the cell so it can help them move and travel this process. Okay. And everything actually is adapted to its own job. The egg would have zoonoplacida. It will help them latch on the uterus lining. It will help them protect the fertilization process, and we're going to take that in a moment, okay? So let's talk about the gametes and the fertilization process. Let's say the adaptations. Now let's see the the egg, okay? The adaptations of human gametes and the egg with the sperm cells. So as you can see, the egg contain, let's say, a gel membrane. We call this zona placida. They have a mitochondria, of course, to produce energy, cell membrane, like a normal cell, cytoplasm, and we call this haploid, which is 1N. The 1N, we call it haploid, and the 2N, we call it diploid. And we already know the meaning of 1N, which is going to be they contain half the number of chromosome, which is going to be 23. And if the case of 2N, it will contain 46 chromosomes, which is going to be the diploid here. Okay. Now, let me go with this process. Same here. Okay. Same goes for the sperm cell. The sperm cell will contain the haploid nucleus, okay, which is going to be referred to be 1N, just to remember. We have the midpiece. This midpiece contain the mitochondria. Now, as you can see that the sperm cell contain a lot of mitochondria. And now why is that? Because the sperm cell, like I said, if we go back, you're going to see that the sperm cell need to move. And, movements need energy. And who's responsible for producing energy in the cell? Good job. The mitochondria. Now we have this piece also, the acrosome. As you can see, there's a gel lining here. And this acrosome contains enzymes. Okay, so contains enzymes that will dissolve this. It will dissolve this area, and it will help them enter this egg cell and eventually fertilize the egg, producing a zygote, which is going to be a 2N. Let's talk about the adaptive features of the sperm cells. And these are the adaptive features, meaning how they adapted to their own job. Now, the sperm cell has a flagellum. Okay, I didn't mention the flagellum, which is going to be the tail. They have enzymes in the head. These will digest the root into the egg, and the flagellum is a help to the movement and contains many mitochondria to provide energy for the movement. While egg will have a cytoplasm, contains store of energy. As you can see, these are energy stores here. All of these are yolk granules, and this, after this like fertilization process happen, they're going to help the baby with the nutrients. Now imagine this as the fruit. The fruit is the fresh part with the nutrients, and the embryo will feed on it. It's the same part here. I will also have jelly-like coating. Okay, changes after fertilization, which is really important. We're gonna take this in a moment. Of course, this is to make an impenetrable barrier after fertilization. So this is really important. This is really important. Now, why? Now, let's say in this process. Okay, so this is the egg. This is the egg cell. Okay, and one of the sperms managed to get in. Okay, after like the sperm will get in. This is the sperm, and it will like drop the nucleus will fuse together, producing the zygote. Now after this process, after this sperm cell enters, what guarantees that other cells won't enter also? And let's say we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 nucleus, and they will fuse together. Who's the one responsible for closing up the doors after one sperm gets in? And that will be the jelly layer here. Okay, the jelly layer here. Sorry. This jelly layer will close, okay, let's say, or make itself impenetrable after the sperm fertilization process happens, and that will be really essential, so we don't get more than a lot of genetic diseases comes up from the addition of a one chromosome, like Down syndrome or the minus of one chromosome. And to prevent excessive chromosomes, this is essential. Okay. Now let's take a comparison between the female and the male gametes. These are the size. As you can see, it's going to be the very small. The egg is larger. Of course, it contain cytoplasm structure, head region, flagellum, many structural adaptations. The egg is round cell because they don't have like a lot of movement to do. They're capable of locomotion. They can move on their own. The egg does not support that. Also, the numbers, they're produced in huge numbers daily, around 100 million per day. Yeah, dear male. So, and thousands of immature eggs in each ovary, but only released each month. Okay, so thousands, but only each month. And pay attention to that. Now, pregnancy, growth, and development of the fetus, of course, after fertilization process. And where does this happen is really important to know. The fertilization happens in the oviduct. Like I mentioned before, it will happen either here or nowhere. Okay? It's either happens there or the fertilization process will be a failure. Okay? Now, after that, of course, this takes about 3 days during the time. The zygote after fertilization, it will divide several times and it will form a ball of cells we call it an embryo. And this embryo will roll up. Okay, let me go back to the drawing phase here. And this embryo, after let's say, after it goes and they mix together, it will roll. It will roll here one after time until it plants itself here. Okay, so after that, an embryo will grow more and the ball of cells will become a fetus. Okay, then a placenta will form. We will talk about the placenta. In the uterus, the embryo will embed itself with a thick lining. We call this implantation, and it will continue and grow and develop. Of course, the gestation period of the humans is 9 months. Major developments of organs will happen in the first 12 weeks, during which time the embryo will get the nutrients by diffusion through what? Through the uterus lining. After this point, after this 12 weeks point, the placenta will form, and the placenta will be a passageway. Okay, we'll see it in a picture. The remaining gestation used by the fetus is grow bigger in size. The fetus surrounding by amniotic sac, and it will have amniotic fluid. Okay, to help like the baby swim and free of motion. And of course, this will form a cushion to help the baby and the mother, because the baby will move, and these movements to prevent to become really dangerous. This will the amniotic sac and the amniotic fluid will help them absorb these cushions. Here, as we can see, let's see the picture here. This is the amniotic fluid here. As you can see, it fills up here, and this is the umbilical cord, and this here, this tiny bit here, as you can see here, is the placenta. Now the placenta, simple job. Okay, so the mother got some nutrients. Let's say mother got some nutrients, and the nutrients will move through the placenta, then the umbilical cord, and then to the baby's blood. Okay, not only nutrients, we also have antibodies and other stuff, like for example immunity. They will travel through from the placenta, even viruses. That's why HIV can travel through the placenta, and an infected mother would also give this to the baby, because the virus could travel from here, from this side. Let me point it out, from here and through the umbilical cord, and goes where? To the baby, and an infection will happen. That will be the general human reproduction. And during this gestation, uh, of course, is going to be the baby growing up from taking nutrients, taking glucose, amino acid, fats, water, and oxygen, all of that from the mother blood. Like we talked before, it will get it through the placenta. We have the placenta, sorry, let me just close this screenshot. We have the placenta process. I don't know why this opening. The placenta takes the glucose, goes like to the baby and takes it up. Sorry for the sound effect, and I thought it will make it more interesting. Also, like if there's a protein for the gym rats here, this baby like take it up also again, and it will take everything from the mother basically. Yeah, the blood. Of course, the blood runs opposite each other, never mixing. So the blood of the baby, the blood of the baby here will run opposite to the blood of the mother, and to prevent mixing, really important, really important. Now, these are some common questions why the blood should not mix. Okay, really simple. Let's say the mother is an A blood type, and the baby is, let's say, an O blood type, O negative, and this is A positive. Any mixing between these bloods, okay, so if the baby mixes with the mother, it's okay, but if the mother mixes with the baby, here comes the problem, because now the immune system of the baby will attack their blood, and we can't have this possibility. Now, if they're both the same, it's fine, but if it's not, we wouldn't take this chance. Of course, the fetus connects a placenta from the umbilical cord. Also, the fetus has urine, has wastes. Since it's not eating, it will not form some feces. Don't like think he will do the doo-doo in the mother's amniotic sac. No. The only waste is going to be transferred through blood, which is going to be carbon dioxide and urea. Movement of all molecules will happen through this process. Please pay attention. It will happen by diffusion. Why? Because it's going to be a difference in concentration gradient. It will be a high concentration of, let's say, CO2, like a lot of CO2, like in the baby, CO2, 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 and it will diffuse by diffusion, because we know it's going to move from the higher concentration to the lowest concentration. Let me like erase this. We have also the placenta is adapted for this diffusion by having a large surface area and a thin wall for diffusion. Of course, it's if it reminds you of something, and take this as a rule, whenever there's a diffusion, if the organ needs to be adapted to the diffusion, it needs to have large surface area and thin walls. Really important. And if you go previously to respiration, for example, if you go for breathing process or breathing organs, the lungs, the alveoli, and you notice it's the same adaptation, which is large surface area, thin walls for diffusion. Also, this is the same for, let's say, circulatory system. When the capillaries like do that by diffusion, and the capillaries intend by large surface area also and thin walls. Okay. Of course, toxins and pathogens. The placenta acts as a barrier to prevent toxins and pathogens getting in the fetus blood. However, not all toxins and molecules will be stopped from this. Okay, this is why women, like pregnant women, are advised not to smoke during pregnancy, because nicotine can cross through the placenta and is really important. Let's talk about the placenta now, and which is special details here. And this is, as you can see, since diffusion has happened, we need those villi-like structures here. As you can see, like these villi. Now, why is that? Why there's a villi? Of course, to increase Surface area. Why do we increase surface area? Because we need more diffusion. Okay, sorry for the handwriting. They say always smart people, they have the worst handwriting. So cheer up for the bad handwriting team. Okay. Now, let's talk about this is the mother blood, and as you can see, that it forms another villi, and this is like an intravillous space, which is contains like a little bit of fluids and stuff. And what happens is, let's say there's, let me like close the photo so we can see better. Let's see if there's an oxygen here, an oxygen molecules. Okay, and since this is diffusion, they will diffuse from here to here and go what through the fetus blood like this. Okay, this will be happen through diffusion, and as you can see, it will go here through the umbilical cord and to the baby itself. Now let's talk about the like biggest problem here for the for this chapter, which is the sexual hormones. Okay, now after the sexual hormones, it will come the menstrual cycle, which is going to be the big juju for the students. I don't know why. Let's see. Now, sexual hormones, of course, we have hormones that affect everything, which is includes the puberty period. We have secondary sexual characteristics. Okay, so for example, the males get his voice more thickened, more let's say he will have more muscular mass. Also, it will has a hair body, more hair body, and this is because of the testosterone. This is what it does to the human body. So high level of testosterones, increasing levels of testosterone causes this thickening voice, and also it changes the physical appearance of the female or the male. And let's talk for the female. What is the effect of, let's say, estrogen on girls? It's breast development, body hairs grow, menstrual cycle begins, and hips get wider. And why hips get wider? To prepare the female for pregnancy. Okay, menstrual cycle, also pregnancy. Body hair grows. This is another side effect. It's a growth hormone, like that targets cells that grows. So this is a side effect for that. Breast development also, this is helps with pregnancy and prepared for pregnancy. While the male secondary characteristics is a growth of penis and testes, we have a facial and body hair, muscles develops, voice breaks, and testes start to produces sperms. These are what they do for the male. And now to the biggest part, which is gonna be the menstrual hormones or the menstrual cycles. Of course, some changes happens of course for both boys and girls during this phase, and emotional changes happen because of the hormones of this period, the menstrual cycle. And we need to take this as an important part. The menstrual cycle is not a big deal. You just need to understand the hormones and the phases by days. Okay, it starts early in adolescents and girls at around 12, and is controlled by hormones. And the main parts or the main players of the hormones is estrogen. We have LH, FSH, and we're gonna talk about these hormones in a bit, but give it a break for now. Okay, so now we have the average menstrual cycle is 28 days long. Like in these cycles, we have the ovulation. Okay, the ovulation is the release of the egg. This is when the egg is released from the ovaries. Okay, and it happens like halfway, like through day 14. You need to know these days, really important. Failure. Now, if you failure to fertilize this egg, okay, this will cause menstruation. This will cause menstruation. And this is happens because the egg now is not fertilized, okay? And it will break down the thickened lining of the wall. You remember when we talked about implantation? When the egg implant itself after fertilization in the thick lining of the uterus? Now, if this egg is not fertilized, we will go through what we call luteal phase, and this is when the egg is gonna die because there's no fertilization, and after dying, it will go through menstruation, and menstruation is breaking down this lining. It's useless now. It's only one-time use, so the lining is not usable for next time, and the menstruation will start. After menstruation will finish, the cycle will start again, growing the lines of the menstruation, and we will look at it at the graph. Let's talk about it here. Okay, so let's go from day 0 to 1. This is day 0. Okay, this is menstruation, like the breakage of the lining, as you can see. Now, from day 7 to day 14, the lining will build up again. It will try to build up again. It is also controlled by hormones. Now, day 14 starts the ovulation. Okay, this is the ovulation. Now the female is ready for fertilization, and it's the highest chance of pregnancy. Okay, happens here. This is the highest chance of pregnancy happens in this phase. Okay, in these areas, and you need to know that. After that, if there's no fertilization, the whole lining, do you see this like mountain here? Do you see this mountain of vessels and blood and all will break down until this area like level to line up and start again. Because this lining is not useful anymore, and it will need to break up and build another one. Okay, that's why it feels painful and it feels cramps, because the muscles, there are some muscles here below. It will push to this side, so it can like drop down the lining. Okay. Now all of these is controlled by hormones, and let's talk about the hormones. We have hormones, we call them FSH and LH. Now FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. It's follicle, which is happens in the ovary. It produces the egg. The follicle produces the egg, and we have the luteal hormone, which is another hormone that controls. Okay, let's see here. So let's say this is from day 0. As you can see, these hormones in day 14, you will notice a spike in FSH. As you can see, like they go in normal FSH, okay, rise in day 7 a bit, but it goes down like this. But in ovulation, the LH will increase. Okay, that's meaning it will stimulate what? The ovulation process. Why the LH stimulate itself in day 14? We already know this is ovulation, so the LH will stimulate the ovulation and the egg will be released. Okay, in this process, who controls the egg is going to be the LH. Also, the FSH, as you can see, is going to be noticing a huge, also a spike in that one. Let's talk about what does it do, each one. FSH, which is going to be follicle stimulating hormone. Now, since it's the eggs comes from the follicles in the ovary, follicle stimulating hormone, it will stimulates the egg maturation in what? In the follicles. Stimulate follicles in the ovaries to secrete what? Estrogen. Okay, so it does two jobs. First of all, egg maturation, and stimulate the follicles, because the follicles have another job. If you remember, remember when we talked about the ovary has another job. It has like to produce estrogen. Yes, the estrogen comes also from the follicles, so it not only stimulated for the egg maturation, but also stimulates the estrogen secreting, okay, or production of estrogen. Okay. Now, LH LH is the breakdown hormone. So it tells the egg, now it's the time. You need to leave the ovary and go to the oviduct like this, okay? Oviduct, okay? This hormone, it will tell the egg stop being in the ovary and go to the oviduct. The result in formation of what we call corpus luteum. That's why we call it luteal hormone, and we will talk about the corpus luteum in another lesson. Now, of course, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is released by pituitary gland. If you don't know where's pituitary gland, it's in the brain. Okay, it's not even in the reproductive system. It's in the brain, and it causes the egg to start maturing in the ovary, and also stimulate the ovaries to produce estrogen. Okay, now also the pituitary gland is also to release LH when estrogen levels reach their peak. Okay, now we will talk about that in a bit. Okay, we have this one. So when the estrogen, now you remember, do you remember the biggest part here? We already know, like, okay, let me do this. So the FSH will have a spike here. Okay, it will raise here. This will send like a message to the follicle, release estrogen. Now the estrogen what will be released? When the estrogen reaches its highest peak, this will send a message to who? To the brain. Now the brain will send a message back by releasing from the pituitary gland. It will spike up the LH. Okay, this means, okay, start building the lining and release the egg through the oviduct. Okay, and we're going to talk about who's responsible for who in a moment. Okay, LH causes ovulation to happen and stimulates the ovary to produce progesterone. We will call that, and we will talk about pituitary gland is stimulated release because of the estrogen levels are high. Okay, now the estrogen has a single job, and we will call that and the roles of estrogen and progesterone in a moment. Now the estrogen stimulates the uterus to develop a lining. Okay, that's why the estrogen is being produced, and I call this hormone is that you don't love me hormone. If you have a girlfriend or a wife, you will understand this hormone. This hormone is not only like increase the mood swings. That's why I call it that. Would you love me if I be a worm hormone? It's also build up the lining of the uterus, so it will be ready for the baby. Okay, so why building up a lining? Because we already lost it through a menstruation. Okay, and we will talk about that. Now, estrogen, the estrogen will replace the lining because we reached high peak. Okay, so I will draw a graph and I will call it a sequential graph after that. Okay, just pay attention to that. After the estrogen, okay, reached its highest peak, the LH will be produced, and the LH will enable, or let's say help secretion of the progesterone. And what is the progesterone? Maintains and thickens the lining of the uterus, inhibits FSH and LH production. If fertilization doesn't happen, levels will drop and menstruation will happen again. So let me go this here. Okay, so let me draw the cycle. Say this is a graph. Let me like change this. This is the graph, and this is day 0. This is day 7. This is 14, and this is 28. Okay, and this is a hormonal graph, by the way. This is a hormonal graph. Okay, so we have two main hormones here. We have the menstruation happened, it finishes. Now let's say the ovulation process, and it like let's say this is the FSH with black, and the FSH will raise up for a bit. Okay, it will raise up here, and this is a signal okay, to the brain. Okay, this is a signal not to the brain, sorry, it's a signal to the uterus or the ovaries. Okay, start the egg, let the egg start maturing and release some estrogen. Okay, release some estrogen. So from that lining, the estrogen will be okay, normal levels here. The estrogen from this point, it will start to raise up. When it reaches its highest point, okay, here let's say the highest point, the brain will understand, okay, the estrogen is at highest point, okay, so the brain will send another signal to our closest friend, is going to be from the pituitary gland. It will spike up the LH hormone. It will be a spike, okay. Now when the LH hormone, okay, when the LH hormone is released, this is, by the way, this is the LH, this is estrogen. Let me like write down, this is estrogen. Okay, when the LH is now released, this is the start of ovulation. Why the ovulation? Because estrogen has a message: thicken, thick lining. Okay, or start building, build. Okay, like build or produce. Let's say build thick lining. Okay, this is the message. The brain gets the message and says, oh, okay, I need to like release LH. LH has a message for who? Of course, the LH, it's a hormone from the brain and has a message to the follicle. Now, this message is release the egg to the oviduct. Okay, and progesterone. Now comes to the last hormone here. Okay, the LH, when it spikes high, it will help another hormone here to the case to spike up. The last hormone to spike up here, we will call it the progesterone, which is going to be also spiking up and maintain what the lining. Now, as the progesterone high level, it will keep the lining. If it drops down, meaning the menstruation, when the progesterone drops, menstruation starts. Okay, so these are the messages that happen. I'll write them in order. Now the first step is going to be the FSH. First step, FSH. The second one is going to be LH. Sorry, not LH. It's estrogen. Now the estrogen will give a signal to the brain, and it will release the LH. So start ovulation and progesterone. And lastly, we're gonna have the progesterone, which is gonna be thick lining and if there's a pregnancy, it will continue. If there's no pregnancy, it will drop, and the drop is a signal for menstruation. Now, I would like to continue, but it's been an hour for this lesson. So this is I will end it like this. Hopefully, in the next video, I will explain it more. But these are the general ideas of the graph itself and what does it control and not control. Now, if you like the lesson and if you understood, please give me a feedback if you'd like to see more of this, if you understood this section. and if you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you for listening and have a good day.